Do you want to know what makes Chicago great at 8? It's Taped with Rabbi Doug. For more than 30 years, Taped with Rabbi Doug has offered the city one-of-a-kind conversations and entertainment. I'm Rabbi Doug, the TV rabbi, and you can tune into my show every Monday night at 8:30 on Channel 19, CAN TV.
I'm comedian Joel Chasnoff. Stay tuned. Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're gonna watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us today. I am so happy to have with me Joel Chasnoff. Welcome to the show.
Rabbi Doug, it's a thrill to be here.
It is a thrill to have you. Let's see. Joel Chasnoff is a stand-up comedian and the author of 4 books, including the recently released Israel 201. Here it is, Israel 201, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. Joel grew up in Evanston, attended Solomon Schechter Day School. I had the great honor of being his teacher in 7th and 8th grade and working with him on his bar mitzvah. And having him here is such a great honor. He has appeared on our show briefly before with John Panette when he was a guest on our show. Joel opened up for him in concert, in comedy. He also is a alumni of Camp Ramah, Wisconsin. After college, he moved to Israel and served in a combat unit of the Israeli Army, the IDF, serving as a tank gunner in the Golan Heights and South Lebanon. And he's still living in Israel today, though he travels to America very often. Joel's a favorite on Jewish comedy scenes for now more than 20 years performing. His comedy is based on real Jewish experiences, not stereotypes. Everything from his short-lived stint as the starting center on his day school basketball team to his year as a combat soldier in the IDF and the challenges of raising Jewish kids today. He currently lives in Ra'anana, Israel. We just had our friend Rabbi Stewart Weiss from Ra'anana on the show recently when he was here in Chicago. A great town. He lives there with his wife and 4 kids. Right now, he's on a 4-month Israel 75 live comedy and book tour. 4 months away, wow.
That's a long bio.
That's a long way.
It's almost the entire time of my tour.
So we're so happy to have him with us, and welcome to the show.
Sure.
Here you are, a comedian, and your latest book, Israel 201, is not Israel 101, but 201. First of all, tell me why you wrote the book, why 201. It says your next level guide to the magic, mystery, and chaos of life in the Holy Land. And would you say that writing this book is from a comedian's point of view, or would you say it's from an Israeli family man's point of view? What is it about? And I wanted to have you on here because you are a funny guy.
Oh, thanks.
And I hope to have you on doing stand-up sometime. Maybe a full set. But I want to talk about the book because when I heard that you came out with this book, and tell me who Benji Lovett is, who you did it with, I said, you are
bombarding me with questions. I got to remember all these.
Yeah, you are somebody who's multi-talented,
thank you.
An author, a comedian, an Israeli in America, and somebody who this community knows so well.
Right.
So welcome, and tell me a little bit about you and the book and why it's Israel 201.
I'll give you the overview. Well, I had the idea about 5 years ago when Israel turned 70 that for Israel's 75th birthday there really should be a book that examined the Israel we never get to see. You know, so much of Israel is what we see in the headlines, whether it's conflict, war, often negative things. And I wanted to show Israel that we usually don't encounter, the Israel behind the headlines, the Israel you didn't know, and examine all those tiny pockets of Israeli life that make it wonderful, magical, and chaotic, because it is a chaotic country. But you really can't know the country for real until you see it up close, and that's what I wanted to present to readers.
So Rabbi Dr. Larry Hirsch, who's a Chicagoan also, who's in town often, just being a doctor and stuff, and visiting his mother and family, he comes in and talks about politics in Israel. He comes in and talks about the living situation in Beit El, where he lives, in Beit El Bet and stuff, but he doesn't talk about those things that you talk about, and so I'm so happy that you're here to talk about them. Tell me, what do you think stands out in your book for people, like not only reading it, but for enjoying it, to say, you know, I never experienced that. I should do that when I'm in Israel. Or what are those things?
Well, it is, look, I am a comedian, and Benji, you asked who Benji is. Benji Lovett is also a comedian. He's a friend of mine. We've been on the scene together for 20 years, and I reached out to him about writing this book together. So the book is written by two comedians. It's not a rah-rah funny book. It's not meant to be. There is humor in there, but it's engaging, and it's easy to read. It's not a heavy tome on the history and politics of Israel and the Middle East. It's meant to show people in an easily accessible way, in short chapters, what it's really like to live in Israel in the early years of the 21st century, now 23 years into the 21st century. What are some of the things we talk about? Cats. Why are there so many cats in Israel? That's
don't we all ask that question?
Right. Other books don't talk about that. Medical clowns. Many countries in the world have medical clowns, but Israel's are the only ones who fly overseas to other countries, to war zones and disaster zones, to bring comfort to people. There's so many special things about Israel that never get covered, and those are some of the things that we reveal.
Wow. What has life been like for you living in Israel, raising your kids in Israel? Obviously, they are Israelis. They are Israelis with parents who speak English very well.
Right.
What has life been like for them, and bringing them back to the United States to visit family and travel and visit? Do they have a feel of what life is like here?
Well, the kids,
or do they do not?
It's a great question. The kids were all raised initially in the United States. It's only 6 years ago that we moved to Israel as a family. So they sort of see both worlds, and they're on the fence. They definitely feel more Israeli now than they used to be, and I see it. When we were just here for Passover, they came in, and we were in Chicago for 2 weeks, and already you can see whether it's speaking their minds and having that Israeli characteristic of dubriut, which is speaking bluntly. Some of they notice the size of houses here. I mean, even the smallest house in West Rogers Park would be a mansion in most parts of Israel, and most people live in apartments, as we do. So they do get to see both sides of it, but overall, their mother, my wife, is a Sabra Israeli, so my kids' Hebrew is good, and they're in both worlds. But when we're there, they're full Israeli.
I hear you. Tell me about your other books for a moment, if we can stop and just pause for a moment. What was your first book you wrote, and what's that one about?
Yeah, the first book is called The 188th Crybaby Brigade. That's my comedic memoir about my service in the Israeli army. After college, at the age of 24, I moved to Israel specifically to join the IDF and served in a tank unit in the Golan Heights in South Lebanon. And that first book chronicles that experience of being a lone soldier in the IDF.
Wow. And did you have any other Americans in your unit with you?
There was one other American. Today there are more than 7,000 lone soldiers. And that's actually, I have 2 chapters about lone soldiers in the book, because it's really fascinating that the whole movement has grown. Back when I was in the Army in the late 90s, there were maybe a few hundred. It wasn't so common to go. And there was one other American, and I'm still in touch with him. And we had a unique bond, being the 2 Americans in the unit.
Kind of cool. What was your second book?
Second book is a cookbook I wrote with an Israeli chef. It's called Balabusta, and it's her recipes, but she wanted to have funny stories about her life in Israel growing up. So I interviewed her. Her name is Chef Einat Admoni. She's won Chopped a couple of times. She's a well-known chef in the New York scene. And that's the cookbook I wrote with her.
So let me tell you a chef from Salmon Schechter who's in Israel.
Do.
Ariel Grimmett Morris.
Hey, I know the name.
I know. And he was a big hockey player too. His brother was a professional hockey player.
Really?
Wow. He was his brother, who's been in our show back in the past. Dov Grimmett Morris. He was the all-star hockey goalie for Harvard. He's in the Harvard Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And he was also NHL and AHL goalie. Ariel is a chef and living in Israel, and
I'll have to check it out.
I think he's been in a lot for years, but he's there. There's another Schechter chef. So there you go with the cookbooks.
Wow.
And your third book?
Third book, nothing to do with Judaism. It's called Essential Tennis. I play tennis a lot, and I paired up with a tennis coach, and we wrote a book about tennis progress, how to improve at tennis, and what it what it really takes, the journey of getting better, not just at tennis, but at anything. It's much different than people assume. So we broke down the tennis improvement process.
So amazing that you are able to author in different realms of.
But you know what? It's all about storytelling, and I think it's not so much different realms. It's finding something you genuinely care about and then exploring it deeply, and that's what makes the project happen.
It's very cool. Before you started writing, how did you decide that you were going to do it, to get into it? I ask authors authors about this all the time. You know, you got to think about, well, am I really going to be able to publish this? Am I really going to be able to write this in a way that people are going to want to read it?
Right.
Do I need to have a ghostwriter to help me make it something that people are going to want to buy or want to read online or in person, or have that book on their bookshelf and not put it in the garbage after they read it? How do you find
in
the
a
way to do
way, you can't ask those questions, because those questions are the end. If you start wondering who's going to read it, how good will it be, then it will be impossible to start. You have to be a little bit delusional and just believe that it will work and it will be good. And look, it usually stinks in the beginning. I mean, writing is hard, but all professional writers say that writing is rewriting. Writing is just getting that first draft out, and then you go back and you show it to friends and you get feedback and slowly improve it along the way. You never knock it out of the park on the first draft.
So you write all the time because you write new shows. You get up and perform. You have to sit down and think about, what am I going to say? How am I going to present it? How am I going to make people laugh? Is it easier to write a book than it is to write a comedy skit or a set that you're going to put on?
The thing about stand-up is you need laughter. If you there's no such thing as a great stand-up set with no laughter. I mean, you need that immediate feedback, and on the one hand, that's good about comedy because you know how it's going, and if it's not going well, you can audible and change your act in the middle to get the laughs. In a book, you never know how the audience is going to react until it's out there into the world, and so you need a little more faith, and you need to pass it around to early readers to get that feedback. But you do need that impact of laughs, whereas in a book, you can be meaningful, you can be touching, you don't need to evoke laughter. So it's just different art forms.
No, it absolutely is. What's your favorite place to have done comedy? You've opened for people, as I mentioned, like John Panette, who's of blessed memory, who is a great famous comedian. I'm sure you've opened up for others, and you've probably been on stage with others, sharing sets. What's your favorite place to perform, and who's your favorite person you've ever performed with or side by side with?
I did perform with Jon Stewart early on in his career. I was an opening act for him, and that was a thrill.
He's great.
When I think, though, of my ideal audience, you know, at this point I've done it all. Colleges, clubs, USO Comedy Tours for Marines in Japan and Korea. I've seen a lot of audiences. And in the beginning, the goal is just to get work and get good. Now the audience I love most is the Jewish audience who knows Judaism. My jokes, my best jokes, my favorite ones are the ones about growing up Jewish and being Jewish in America and being an American Jew in Israel and navigating those identities. And the audience that gets that are Jews who have a Jewish attachment, not just Jewish in name, but for them Judaism is a part of their life. And they'll relate to my jokes, you know, about tiny minutiae of Judaism like the Amidah or the tunes of the Kaddish that would never go over in a comedy club, but to the Jewish soul say something.
Wow, so there are others like you.
There are
others out there that feel the same way as you do, and it's a good feeling, and it's just like giving a sermon or speaking in a public forum. When you're speaking to people who understand what's going through your head, rather than trying to adjust what you're saying to people in the outside world, it certainly makes a difference.
Well, in that sense, there's so much of a relationship between teacher, rabbi, comedian. It's all about connection, and when you have an audience who is engaged with your message, I think it's the same feeling for any of those professions.
Sure. So tell me, is there someone that you'd like to perform with? You're like, you know, I would love to be on stage with him because we would mesh as being on stage together, or one after the other. Is there someone out there that you're you know, is in your sights to perform with or to invite to a show that you're doing?
Well, look, I can't say that I would necessarily mesh with Steve Martin if we were to be on stage together, but God, if we're talking about
your hair's similar.
I know that hair. I dyed it to be like Steve Martin. If we're talking about who we idolize, the comedians
I want to know who you idolize.
Steve Martin was the first comedian I ever liked. I thought he was silly and goofy, but also smart at the same time. And I'm not the only one. Many comedians of my generation say that Steve Martin is one who touched them and who evoked something special inside of them. And I also like the originals. Billy Crystal and Robin Williams of blessed memory, and Seinfeld, and those guys. I admire all of them and would love to be on stage with.
So how about those? Are there those that you admire that come from the previous generation? People like Carl Reiner and people of that generation. Are there anybody in that generation that you?
Here's a name. Some of the young people might have to look it up. But Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh, I love Rodney Dangerfield.
What I love about comedians these days is their writing. Writing that is sharp, that's efficient, where you use the minimum amount of words to get maximum laughter. And Rodney Dangerfield's writing is so incredibly sharp and brilliant that when I need inspiration, I'll sometimes listen to him.
Something about Rodney Dangerfield is sometimes I don't think that he actually writes the things that he does. I think he's just so sharp that a lot of it just comes off the cuff.
I don't know.
On the situation, I don't either.
But he also could be such a good actor that it makes it seem like it's off the cuff, and yet it's playing.
He's so good. He's so good. And, I love people like Buddy Hackett. I love, and there are so many from the past generation of comedians. So that's really great.
Look, I had a great memory, if I may share it. I was in Zany's Comedy Club very early in my career, an open mic night, and there was a guy sitting in the back of the room, and then the lights came up, and it was George Carlin. George Carlin was in town to perform a big concert the next night, but he came to Zany's to watch open mic night, and God bless him, he took each comedian one by one and sat with them and gave us notes and advice, and I will never forget that.
That is so cool. Thanks for sharing that. Oh my gosh.
I haven't thought about that in years. But,
also one of my favorites. Cool. Let's talk about Israel 201 for a minute.
Sure.
Somebody picks up the book and is reading it. What was one of your things that you put in that book that you said, I think everybody in the world, every Jew in the world at least, if not everybody in the world, should know about this, and nobody does?
Wow. I could really pull out any of the chapters. There are 75 short chapters. It's made for a generation of people who are used to texting and reading things on their phone, so it's short chapters, 1,000 words each. One of my favorite chapters is called Hebrew is Magic. This is something I really think that every Jew, and even beyond Judaism, should be connected with, is how magical Hebrew is as a language. I interviewed a linguist in Israel about how Hebrew words can teach us ethics and life lessons just from the shoresh of the word, the root of the word. There's a message inside it about how to live, and I thought that was something worth sharing, and that's one of my favorite chapters in here.
Very nice. What are your goals for the future? Do you have other books in your mind?
You sound like my mother, Rabbi Doug. Now 4 books, comedy, but now what? What's next?
Because you're an author. And authors finish books, and they either do one of two things. They either do sequels to their books,
or they never write another book again.
Or they really want to write another book in a completely different area. Like yours are all in different areas.
I've started to think what the next book might be. However, you asked about writers and writing habits, and it takes 4 or 5 years to write a book. And after you do, you want to get it into the world. So right now, my number one goal is to bring this out into the world. Because I know people...
Right here, Taped with Rabbi Doug, we're bringing it out into the world. Israel 201.
This should be
Chasnoff and Benji Lovett.
After it's out tonight on Rabbi Doug, Taped with Rabbi Doug, it should be good. But, that's what I'm focused on now, is bringing, especially with Israel's 75th birthday. I want to let people know, if you are at all interested in Israel, this book will speak to you.
Wonderful. What do you love about living in Israel, and what don't you love about living in Israel? Because you've been there for a long time already, And
I'm glad you're willing to ask that double question, because not everything is perfect. What do I love?
It isn't.
Let me start with what I don't. What's tough about Israel, it is definitely loud. People are in your business. People are much more upfront than they are in the States, and I'm still Midwestern. I'm still used to a little bit of private space, and so that's one thing that's a little bit tough. There's something called Tama, which is reconstruction. There's a lot of construction and building going on. And the apartment building next to mine, they've been building it for 5 years, revamping it, and tearing parts of it down, and it's like living next to a construction site, and this is all over Israel. So those parts are hard. But what do I love? In Hebrew, the word is kehilatiyut. It means community. I really do feel a connection with not just the land, but the people. Like I feel like we're in it together. And even with all the chaos unfolding in Israel right now, I think what will save the country is the connection between the people. It's a special feeling. Those of you who've been to Israel, like on Friday afternoon, as the quiet starts to settle in for Shabbat, you feel that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. I don't feel that here in America, but I do feel it there.
That's an awesome thing to feel.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk politics, but I do want to ask you a little bit just about the feeling about protests in Israel, because it's everywhere, it's in the news. We don't know what's going to happen with the judicial reform or not, or whether it does. But one of the things that I love about the protests, and I'm not pro or con in any way, is that people are raising Israeli flags. They're not carrying guns. People are not swearing at each other and yelling and threatening. It's an ahdut of sorts, a unity of sorts of the people, just saying we have the right to share our opinion, and we're doing it for the love of our country, not to start a civil war. How do you feel about that living there?
Well, look, that was actually, I'm glad you noticed that. That was a conscious decision among the protesters to hold Israeli flags, because it was important for them, from what I've heard in interviews and read, to convey that we are not against the country. We actually love the country very much, even though many of the protesters we might call them secular Israelis. They wanted to make clear that even though they're not religious in the way that other people might define, that they still very much are attached to the country in the Jewish story of the country. And that's why the Israeli flag is so popular at these rallies. And I think it's a good sign. And I think, again, it is ultimately the achdut that will somehow save the country.
Very cool, very cool. Your family in America, do they have any fears with all the things that are going on, with the rockets every once in a while, with the protesters, with things that other people see in the news and are scared about, but those of us that know better aren't? Does your family have any fears for you, or are they comfortable?
I think 30 years ago, those fears might have been a little more founded. First of all, there were more terror attacks happening, and one could say, oh, stay back in America. But to be honest with you, I think we can all see America is kind of a dangerous place now too.
Scary.
And I think also Israel gets a bad rap. I think we hear about the incidents, and unfortunately there have been a few more lately, but on a day-to-day basis I still feel safer in Israel, or just as safe in Israel as I would in pretty much any other country. So it's still safe, even though the headlines might not always portray it that way.
So I want to share a quick story if I could. So my daughter just got back Sunday from Israel. She was also in Israel for Passover with her chassan, and introducing to his family before their marriage. And she said they were in Eilat for Pesach.
Okay.
So she said on the 7th night of Pesach,
which is when Pesach ends.
which is the last
night, right?
The last night, Yom Tov, when Yom Tov started, that night at midnight or 1 in the morning, 300 or 400 people walk to the shore, which is the shore of the Red Sea for the most part, and say Tehillim, psalms and stuff on the 7th night of Pesach.
I mean,
and you know, who walks out on the street and walks to the water in the middle of the night in America? I mean, it's dangerous to do. We don't do it.
But it's also special to think about. Wow, the arc of history.
Right there.
It really is right there in your face, and that's very special too. To see that, to know that these rocks and these trees are part of your story. That still means something to me.
So cool, so cool. Of your comedy show and bits, what's one of your favorite jokes?
Oh my.
What's one of your favorite jokes to tell?
First of all, you should know that comedy in a talk show never goes over well.
That's why I didn't ask you to do a set.
You need the audience, but
what's one of your favorite jokes?
One of my favorite jokes. Well, I mean, talk a lot about, let's talk about Schechter. I mean, you were at Schechter when I was at Schechter, selling Barton's candy. One of my favorite jokes is a long story I tell about going door to door selling Barton's Passover candy to my neighbors who are not Jewish in Evanston, Illinois. And, you know, they'd say, oh, I'd love to buy a box. I just bought Girl Scout cookies last week. How much is it? And I would say $40. And they've never bought a $40 box of candy before. But that was one of my first introductions to the idea that the entire world does not understand the Jewish world. And
I love it.
Barton's candy is definitely one of my favorite anecdotes to share.
I love it. You are traveling around, away from home. Obviously, your family was here for Passover.
Making me sad, Rabbi Doug.
You travel a lot, away from your family.
Yeah.
Is it hard on them? Is it hard on you? You know, I'm friends with a lot of musicians, a lot of famous musicians,
right.
Rock stars, been on my show, become friends with them, stay in touch with them.
What do they say?
When they come to town, they hate it. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite bands, who I'm very close with, the members of the band, is REO Speedwagon. We all know REO Speedwagon.
Wow.
For those who are there.
I'm honored to.
And their band leader is their keyboard player, and he's retiring because he wants to be with his family. You know, he's already up
Right.
there in his 70s, and he's decided that, being the founder of the band and all these years, that he's ready to just do special things with them, but he's not going to tour with them anymore. So how does it feel to be away from your family for sometimes months at a time when you're on tour and doing shows? Is it tough for you? Is it tough for them? Or has it become part of life?
Well, until this moment, I wasn't thinking about it, but thanks for bringing it up. The truth is, look, it's part of balance. I mean, I made a decision that I wanted to pursue this art, comedy, writing, and touring to promote the books, and that's something I love very much. Along with that goes being away from home at times. You know, I could be at home all the time and work a different type of job, and there are definitely moments when I miss them a lot, and I think maybe I should just do that, the standard more 9 to 5, but I know, you know, who I am, and my soul is, right now I still feel attached to this, and we all know it, and when I am home, we spend a lot of time together and make it work. And I think every family has these dilemmas that they have to suss out, and this is ours.
So when you come around and you do shows for day schools, for Jewish organizations, federations, whoever it is that you're doing a show and you're doing a stand-up show and you're traveling around the country and stuff, you know, you're a day school student yourself.
Yeah.
You're a very strong part of the Jewish community.
Right.
In Chicago, a lot of people know you, if not almost everyone.
Impossible to walk down the street here without,
it is, for me too. When you're out of town, do people come walking up to you after the show and say, Joel, it's me?
You know, once in a while, it has definitely happened. I've been in a grocery store or on an airplane, and I've run into someone who's at the show, and it's really a thrill that people remember your acts and tell you did a great job.
Well, I can't tell you how much I am
Is our
happy.
time over already?
It is. I know, it goes so fast.
Chick chop. That's what they say in Israel. Give one more
I
plug.
want to wish you much success. Israel 201 by Joel Chasnoff and Benji Lovett, your next level guide to the magic, mystery, and chaos of life in the Holy Land. Comedian and author Joel Chasnoff, thank you so much for being on the show, and I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remember, you can check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web. If you, once again, want to email Joel, ask him any questions, or ask him about his book, or find out more about getting it, or his other books, info@tvrabbi.com, and I know he'll get back to you. Thanks for being with us. Hope to see you next week, right here, same time, same place, on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.